Okay, welcome to the 5th tutorial on CSC show control. We're going to continue with our show design we've currently got and hopefully get towards the end of Act 1. So the next thing, after we've come out of this danger sequence, the director would like a telephone to be ringing on stage. So this is a classic effect that ends up being used quite a lot. So obviously the starting point of any telephone ring is going to be some sort of telephone ringing sound effect. Let's see what we've got. So the first issue with a telephone ring is the number of rings. So we either need to make a really long wave file so that it always covers the right number of rings for the show and we don't run out, especially if it's very dependent on actor movement. Sometimes it may be long enough, sometimes not. And the other thing is what happens when you pick up the phone. So we'll just have a look at a couple of ways that CSC can help us in those sort of situations. So if we open up the WAV file, we can see there's actually quite a lot of rings on this file, so we're probably not going to run out in the average show. But one thing we can do here is actually start to use CSC's built-in looping capability. So I've straight away gone right to the very end of the file, and you'll see that the last ring has a nice tail on the end. So I'm going to select here, I'm going to start the sound effect from here, and then I'm going to go to the looping tab, and I'm just going to say loop until exit, and I'm going to in here, and probably about there we would want to run the loop back again. And when we play this now, it's not quite right. Let's extend that a little bit further. In fact, the loop in point is just a little bit behind where it needs to be, so just nudge that a little bit as well. So what we've now created is a indefinitely ringing telephone, so that will go on until the end of time. You'll notice that CSC has gone into its loop mode. If you want to exit from that, we can just hit exit loop, and then when it gets round to exiting, it will indeed. So we have actually now created a scenario with a telephone that will ring indefinitely. So there it is on that cue, and we can see that it lasts 4 seconds now, but it's in an indefinite ringing loop. So how do we exit from that? You may have noticed when we were looking at the player actions earlier that one of the actions was cancel loop. So very simply, we add another cue in here, and we say stop phone or pick up phone, whatever we want to call it. We go to the player in question, which is player 1, and we say cancel loop. At which point, when we're ringing this will ring indefinitely up until the point at which we cancel the loop. So we cancel the loop, loop's finished, and it rings out. There is, of course, a latency. Depending on your buffer sizes, it will only be able to cancel the loop if it hasn't already preloaded that piece of audio. So sometimes you may find that if you're very close to the out point, you won't actually be able to exit in time. With the smaller buffer sizes set up, and it generally becomes a lot easier. We haven't talked much about audio systems in CSC yet. We will come on to further information on that than the different drivers. So there we go, running the phone, try and exit the loop. And because we are on actually the Windows Media driver, the actual buffer size is quite long. If you were to run that on ASIO, in fact, we can have a very quick look now. So I'm going to change this to the ASIO driver, and I'm just going to use my Hammerfall card here. And it's actually output 3 I've got connected here. And you can see because the buffer size is a lot shorter, it's been able to cancel loop a lot quicker. Of course, the director may decide that actually they want to hear the sound of the telephone being picked up, which does give a more realistic effect. So sometimes just stopping the phone ringing in a natural way isn't always the best option. So there's a couple more sound effects we have in here. And you'll see that we also have telephone pickup and telephone receiver pickup. So I'm not sure which of those is best. So let's just have a listen to what they're all doing. So let's drag this in now. Telephone pickup, and we also have telephone receiver picked up. And there they both are. So let's see what we have. Okay, so one of them is a mechanical kind of noise. And then the other one here, it's just a nice tail with a ding at the end. So I'm going to change my loop into just a very quick fade out. Maybe 0.2 seconds. And what we're going to attempt to do now is when it's ringing, we're going to fade out the original ring very quickly, and then we're going to end up with the pickup sound. Okay, so not quite there. We can hear there's a bit of a gap in that point there. So let's just have a look. It seems like one of the files isn't quite kicking in. Yeah, so here we've actually got the click and then we've got the ding. So let's... we actually start from this point here, and then we have the click sound. Just turn that up a little bit. Yep. And let's see what we've got now. And now we have that perfect telephone ending sound. So that, using CSC's looping capability and the option of firing at the exact right point, does give the DSM a very realistic telephone control whilst just having it all pre-recorded. So now that our audio design for Act 1 is almost complete, we need to turn our attention to actually the system itself. We did mention earlier that one of the common things, especially in the United Kingdom at the moment, is for a show of this sort to be controlled by stage management rather than a dedicated sound operator. Usually equipment-wise, we would be seeing a computer and maybe a small mixing desk. One of the disadvantages of having a small mixing desk that is backstage is that anyone could potentially knock it, any stage crew moving past or actors hurrying to get on the stage. So really we need a way of ensuring that the mixing desk is in the correct state at the beginning of every show. Of course, we could expect the stage manager to do that, but it would be nice if we had a way of doing that automated-wise. So, of course, we can. And the usual way of doing that with a digital mixing desk would be simply to recall a scene. So whilst the scope of programming scenes is beyond this tutorial, what I am going to do now is just look into how we will use CSC to send a MIDI event at the beginning of the show to ensure the mixing desk is in the right state. Most mixing desks will allow a program change message to be sent to recall a particular scene. So let's just see how we would do that inside CSC. First thing we need to do is head to the MIDI menu and go to the MIDI output setup. Here we will see that we have two ports, A and B, and each port is divided into the 16 channels. The names here are simply for reference, but when you have a lot of MIDI devices on a chain, it becomes quite useful to be able to know what's what. So let's assume for the purposes of this that our mixing desk is set to MIDI channel 1, is set to respond to program changes on MIDI channel 1. So I'm just going to change this name and call it the mixer. You will also see we have a column here labelled PC0. Most MIDI messages will range from 0 to 127 for values, but with most mixing desks, scene numbers tend to start at 1. So a value of 0 usually recalls scene number 1 on a mixing desk. So by default, CSC will actually translate. If you tell it that you're sending a program change message, it will list them as 1 to 128. By ticking this box, you can force CSC to show you program change messages as 0 to 127. But it absolutely helps programming if you keep it in its default state, because it will help to make sure that the numbers are 1 to 1. The other thing to do in here is actually select your MIDI device. So in my case, I've got a RME MIDI port, which I need to select. That's all we need to do. Hit accept. And then we need to go into the MIDI menu again and actually select the module that we want. So in this case, we're sending simple MIDI commands. So we open up the MIDI command window. I'll just pop it over here. And then I'm going to move to the cue that I want to actually send the MIDI command on. So when we start the pre-show music is probably a good time to actually ensure that the mixing desk is definitely in the correct state. So for now, just to add to the pre-show, we simply select the pre-show cue, and then over here on our MIDI command window, we can see we have a device, action, and value. Under device is the 16 channels, which we've named, so we know that we want the mixer, and the action we want in this case is going to be program change. And we're going to go to memory number 1, because that's the one that we have for the state for the show. The way these modules work is that we click plus to add events to the current cue. If we hit this button here, the test, then we can test that the event is working. As we've got Q1 highlighted, we're going to click the plus button. And what that's done is that has now added the mixer program change to cue number 1. We can have up to 16 MIDI events in this window per cue. Probably what we might also want is maybe at the end of the show, maybe there's a mute state for the mixer that's on memory number 2. So we may want to have value 2, assuming we've got the correct cue selected. And then we just click on the plus button, and then we can see that we've added MIDI program change 2 to the end of the show. And then every time I recall the pre-show, we've now got the pre-show music playing, and we have also sent our MIDI message into the mixer. If you need to go back at any point and change this program change, you can either double click and edit it and then click the tick when you're finished, or you can actually just delete and re-add. So for instance, we could completely change this and just re-add it, but simply double clicking and reapplying with the tick will actually allow you to change that in situ. So that's the end of this bunch of tutorials. Hopefully now you've seen how to add files to a cue, layer some things together, seen a couple of the more advanced audio features inside CSC, and also some basics in adding MIDI commands and being able to group cues and events together. Of course, you can always close up description when you're completed, so we have a much smaller cue list. We don't have to see all of the information. And if you want to be even more precise with your cue list, you can actually go in and add different colours to cues so that when the DSM is running a show, it's quite obvious what is what and what's where. Hope you've enjoyed that first set of tutorials. There will be more to follow.